I am Michael Drinda.
And I'm Jake Bennett. Oh, yeah.
And this is episode 162 of the North Meets South web podcast.
Chicka chicka chinna. How many times do I have to do this before I learn my lesson? Every time I open a can like that, I get it all over my keyboard, and it's just a mess. So what in the world? This is Swoon Peach Tea. I actually messaged Aaron and said he should try this. He should.
I think the way that it works is that you have to send him a case of it. You have to ship it to his office.
Are you serious right now?
Yeah.
Is that what he said? Like, so in order for him to drink a soda on his... Oh, Siri is talking to me. So he wants me to send him a case of stuff. No, I don't think it's
He doesn't want you to. That's what happened after he put the first episode out and he put, his office address into the internet. People started sending him cases of various sparkling waters. So Aaron, if you're listening to this,
if it was only that easy, he doesn't listen to this show. Let's be real.
He's a man of the people.
Dude barely has enough time to record all the podcasts that he's on, much less listen to podcasts. Pretty sure the dude doesn't listen to us.
I feel like he records a lot of podcasts because I just saw he posted a link to the one that he did with Glauber from Terso back in June, and it's the first I'm seeing anything of it. So, yeah.
I know. He's everywhere. The dude is everywhere.
I mean, when it is your full-time job to create content, I suppose it makes it a bit easier when your entire 9 to 5 is content creation than for you and I who are doing this in our lunch breaks and after the kids are in bed and things like that.
No, for sure. I think that's definitely true. I mean, let's be real. I'm stoked for him. I mean, he's done. The thing is, like, it's not like he's a slime bag and he's just like getting on these shows. I mean, the reason people have him on the show is because he's a genuinely really nice guy, a really good guest because he's great at talking and he's interesting and he's funny. And the quality of the content that he puts out is next level. Like, so if you saw the Postgres trailer thing, mastering Postgres, I mean, it looks like a trailer for like an album or something. It's incredible. Like the amount of effort and work that he puts into this. And then his friend Steve as well, right? Tryhard Studios, both of them together. It's just incredible stuff. And so, good on him. I'm glad it's going well for him. You'd hate to see somebody put in all that effort and then fail. I'm really glad that people are recognizing it for what it is and, rewarding him, I guess, quote unquote. Maybe not like monetarily, but like rewarding him with like, distribution essentially, getting him on the show, getting him in front of other people, Well,
I messaged him this morning because I woke up and my entire Twitter timeline was just like his face over and over again. Everyone just like sharing, retweeting, quote tweeting, him reposting, like everyone saying, how good this video looks. So I think I watched it about 4 or 5 times.
I watched it once and then I messaged him. I was like, dude, I think it was fire. It was awesome. So good. So
I said, is there any concern? Is there any concern over using Frank Sinatra? Like what's the worst here? And I think we both decided that the worst would be that they get like a cease and desist and they would just have to take the video down. But at that point,
or change the music.
Like, everyone knows.
Yeah, exactly. They've gotten the exposure for it. Yeah. Yep. Really good. I mean, the video quality. I mean, like I wonder what he shot it on. I mean, he had to set all those shots up by himself. It's not like he has an assistant or running around in his office.
Honestly, they did. Someone that did. He did have someone come out. I think he tweeted about it last week. So
okay,
and like we're just feeding that machine right now. We're just talking about his content creation business, and you should all check out what is it, masteringpostgres.com or something like that. So
who knows? I don't have any idea. Yeah,
I've never used Postgres in my life, but I think between this course and Laravel Cloud having serverless Postgres by default, although I think Taylor did say in his Q&A that they plan to have MySQL available on launch. But I think between those two things, there is a good chance that there is going to be a lot more Laravel developers in particular looking at Postgres in the coming months.
Yeah, sure. Why not? I mean, the only thing is I don't know anything about it. That's the only limiting factor for me. But I mean, if you're using
all take care of that.
I was gonna say, if you're using the grammar without like eloquent, it doesn't really matter. I mean, it's just it's just another driver, so who cares? But anyway, yes, no, it's I'm glad for him. It's good stuff. There was something else I was going to talk about regarding that, but don't remember what it was. So no worries. Okay, a couple things I would love to talk to you about today. Number one, I would love to talk to you about tenancy in Laravel and talk about storing files per tenant in a segmented location. I want to talk about that. I think that's interesting, and I think it's a challenge we're trying to solve right now. I also want to talk about an IAM policy that uses the username of an IAM user to segment the permissions, which I really, really like, and I can share in a gist log. It's something that we've used recently, and I sort of just stumbled across, and I was like, I really like that pattern, so I'm going to do that. So we should talk about that. And then you had something recently that you were messing with you talked about this in Cache Money. Oh, you know what else I want to talk about is testing batches.
Yeah, that looked gnarly.
It is a bit gnarly. Yeah. Yeah, but no, I think we should talk about that a little bit. And then what did you have? You had something the other day you were talking about, and I was like, oh, this makes good sense.
Talking about enums. I don't know. Is that it?
That's it. Enums. Yes. Enums. Exactly that. Yep. I'm going to write these down because otherwise I'm going to forget them.
You will forget that. So, that is what always happens.
Yep. So I said we should talk about tenant storage. Talked later about my policy segmenting by username of IAM user. And then you were talking about enums. And what else was there? Did I say something else or no?
Batch testing.
That's it, batch testing. Thank you. Batch testing. We'll see if we get through all that. If we don't, that's okay. We can talk about it some other time. We're on episode 160, so I'm going to write that down here too. And this is why Caleb just talks about stuff as soon as it comes to his brain in Notes on Work, which I got to say also, if you have not listened to that, you definitely should because it's really awesome.
Sorry, tell me about tenanted storage.
Tenanted storage. Okay, so here's the challenge, right? And maybe it's unnecessary, but my fear is that if I'm using something like Spatie Media Library and I have models that are scoped to a tenant, it feels weird to me to just use the media library to just add on a media item to that tenant. And then it just stores it in this S3 media location. That's it. You have the media disk and everything's just chucked into the root directory. And I guess I just feel like I want a little bit more separation between the files than a record in a database. Like I want to protect myself somehow from my own stupidity and, you know what I mean, accidentally giving someone else access to something that doesn't belong to them, or them being able to be nefarious and get to a URL that they should not be able to get to, or to generate a temporary link to a file that they should otherwise not have access to. Yeah. And that's my fear. And maybe that's unfounded, but I don't think it is. I think it's actually probably a good idea to protect myself from those sorts of things where like I might accidentally forget or have something like that. So it's just this layered approach, this idea of layered sort of, things that prevent me from having unauthorized access to these different file locations. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on that first, before I dig into it? Like, yay, nay? Do you think that seems like a reasonable fear? What do you think?
I think the main thing there would be like collisions in file names between tenants. But if you're just using Laravel's default stuff where it generates a file name from a hash or a random string or whatever it is that it does, then I think that's not a concern. I think the default is to like store those things as private files. So you can't get a directory listing on S3 and you can't just access these things without a signed URL. So I think the opportunity to accidentally stumble upon a file is taken care of at this, at this high level by S3. I think if you are accidentally leaking media records between tenants, the problem is in like application logic land, where you are like if you are leaking media models between tenants, you are probably potentially leaking other information between tenants, and that's something that you need to look at. That said, segmenting,
which I agree. And that's what I'm saying is like I am confident that we will get it right most of the time, but I'm afraid that there will be times or there will be something where I will, somebody, even if it's not me, somebody on my team will accidentally write something or we won't even realize that it is leaking something. Mm-hmm. And in the case that it does, I want to have another mechanism that will protect me from giving that person access.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, if you leak the model to the wrong user in the wrong tenant, you are going to leak access to that file anyway, because I assume, given that you are using signed URLs to access those files, if you happen to return that model, you are returning a authorized link to that file anyway, irrespective of where it's stored.
And this is the backstop, right? So the backstop is if I'm storing them. So let me just tell you, sort of this leads into my second part here, which is this idea of a policy in AWS that allows me to control access to particular folders, I guess you could call it particular directories inside of a bucket based on the user that is currently authenticating to that bucket, okay? So the way that I have this this policy set up is it says allow listing of buckets for, let's just call it Jake's media bucket. Okay, so you can list buckets for Jake's media bucket because you have to have that permission for some reason in order to be able to do anything in there. You have to have the ability to list buckets. Great. Yep. But the ability to get, put, or delete is restricted to a path that is scoped to the username of the IAM user that is currently having this policy applied to them. So if I have a user, an IAM user called, let's just use Wilbur. Like Wilbur is the name of my employer. That's the tenant, is Wilbur. Then what happens is Wilbur has access to Jake's media bucket / Wilbur / anything within that directory works. It'll just work. I can get, put, and delete in there, which is great. So if there's another one, what's the name of your employer? LMG. So if we also have Jake's media bucket / LMG, even in the case that I accidentally get access to a record that belongs to LMG, if I try and go get something that lives in the LMG bucket, because I'm authenticated as the Wilbur tenant as far as the credentials to AWS are concerned, I will not be able to get a signed URL to LMG.
Okay.
So that is the backstop. It's like, yes, I may have access to the model somehow, but the signed URL, when I go to get that, will be covered up, will be protected by the fact that I have different AWS credentials based on the tenant. Right. Now, that brings in other challenges, right? There are other challenges like now where do you store those AWS credentials and those sorts of things. But in theory, without thinking about those other things, that is my question. It's like, is that a good idea? Does that sound reasonable? And I think it does, but I'd like to hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah, so we at the moment are using the tenancy for Laravel package that kind of handles this stuff on the fly. So based on whatever your tenant is, it will swap out the storage as part of the application boot process. So it goes and scaffolds it and sets a prefix to like whatever the tenant ID is. So everything's in one bucket and then it's /tenant, whatever the UID is, or whatever the ID of that tenant is. So all of that stuff is segmented, and we use domain-based tenancy. So, it would be wilbur.whatever, lmg.whatever. And so it would then switch to that tenant. You would authenticate to that tenant, and then, but it's still all using the same set of credentials to access each of those tenants. So even though the files themselves are segmented, you still have. So I think you with your IAM policy, you have an additional layer on top, so long as you're also switching the credentials as part of that boot process there, which I think that adds a little bit of extra protection. I think the way that the tenancy for Laravel package does it, it's just swapping the bucket, and that I think is more around a portability perspective, where if you wanted to pick up a tenant and shove them onto their own EC2, for example, or onto their own node, you can do that and just pick up that whole thing and bring all their storage and then put it somewhere else, as opposed to like isolating between the buckets. So I think you've got that extra layer at the moment where, you know, you're accounting for the possibility of inadvertently leaking the models, but because you are also switching the credentials used to access those files, even if you did get a URL, it would still deny you access anyway, because it would be generating a link to a file that, like, with a different signing key. So
that's right. That's the idea.
Yeah, I think that's probably fine. And like, it obviously depends on what you're trying to protect here. Like, if it's just profile photos, then it's probably not as critical. But I assume, given the nature of the business, that you are protecting financial information, things like that, where you would, you would want to be, you know, protecting that stuff at a higher level. So
personally identifiable information is the biggest, the biggest thing. You don't want to leak that one. And I'm also quite sure that, you know, the level of clientele that we're going to be servicing, they're going to want to know that in addition to logical separation of those files, there's also going to be, you know, some sort of separation of credentials as well, for this exact reason, for the reason we're talking about. Now, the thing is, I haven't exactly figured out how I'm going to do this yet, is the only trick. Like, I don't know the actual architecture I'm going to use to accomplish this. So one way I've thought about doing it is, and the interesting thing about this tenant app that we have is, like, the max number of tenants we'll ever have is like 15, right? Like, it's not like each tenant can get set up manually. Like, I could store each one of the credentials in the ENV if I wanted to. You know what I'm saying? Like, could swap them out based on the tenant, just on using like some convention of the naming of the ENV, and be done with it. So it's like, what I could do is I could use I could even set up in the file systems.php a different disk per tenant. The tenant could have their own disk, and then I would use the credentials. I could store the credentials in there, and then I'd swap out the disk, and then be good to go. So that's an option as well, and that would probably happen during the service provider. You know, just booting up the app, then you'd swap out the disk, and then you do all that stuff. Yeah,
I think that's probably an easier way to do it. If you were to configure a disk rather than dynamically switching the credentials of a single disk, if you were to, like, if you know that it's only going to be 15 or 20 or whatever, that you can just configure them as you go, it's going to be easier to just configure the disk and then target a specific disk based on the tenant, rather than trying to swap the credentials used for a single disk at runtime.
Right. Yes, exactly. And then the hope there would be that, you know, you wouldn't make the stupid mistake of saying, like, okay, well, when you're trying to go get the documents for this claim, just use the team ID of that claim and then swap to that disk. It's like, no. The only time you ever swap the disk is at this time you boot the app, and that's based on the currently logged in tenant. That's it. And no other places do you ever do that. You always reference the disk that's loaded into the existing, you know, the tenant, the user that's logged in. You never do it based on the actual claim itself. I think that'd be the only way. So, but I think I would sleep better at night knowing that was the case. Yeah, that there's no way for them to swap that out, or if I did leak a claim, it's not going to, like, you know, it would just basically be like, the claim's not there. It doesn't. I don't see any folder by that name. So
I think that's
okay. Cool.
I think that's reasonable.
Okay, cool. That's helpful. I appreciate having that discussion. So again, I with that sort of like IAM policy thing, just as a heads up, like I can throw that in a just log if that's helpful for anybody. The really big benefit to me was that I didn't have to write a new JSON policy every time I wanted to make a new user that had access to a specific location inside that bucket. All I had to do was create a new user, attach that policy, and I was done. Attach one policy. And so all you have to do there is basically reference the username in the path by just using, I think it's actually a $sign. I think it's a dollar username inside of the policy itself. And it will use the username of the logged in user. Now, one other thing to notice there is as well, it's case sensitive. So like if you have Wilbur uppercase, the capital W, or Wilbur lowercase, those are two different locations. Or two different, the name of the user is case sensitive, and so it matters when you're trying to look at that disk location. So, yeah, there you have it. There you have it. Okay.
Nice. Yeah, I think you're covering your bases there, given what you're storing. I think the only decision really you need to make is, do you want to configure n number of disks, or do you want to figure out how to dynamically switch them at runtime?
I think having a number of disks is probably fine. The only thing that I will have to be careful about or just consider is that when I'm doing like the media stuff, Spatie Media Library, I think there is a way though. You could just say on disk. You could just put it on a specific disk. Like it's a fluent call. Yeah, I could just do that. No problem. That should be easy enough.
And I don't know where I saw this recently. I think it might be like Stephen Bauman has been tweeting these kind of things recently where he's talking, and maybe it was you that retweeted it, talking about putting queue names into an enum. And I think you could do the same thing with your tenant, like with your file system disks. And that way you don't have to worry about typos and things like that.
Yeah, we do that right now with any of our disks. Is we put them in. Now, okay, this is actually an interesting one too. Let me cover what you're talking about first, which is yes, in filesystems.php, instead of having a string name for the disk, we use a enum there. Now, we were using just classes and constants, right? Because with a class and a constant, it always references the string value. You don't have to do arrow value, which looks so much nicer. You could just say disk ;: Wilbur or disk ;: LMG or whatever you said yours was.
Yeah.
Whereas now I have to do disk ;: Wilbur arrow value, which I do not like that. That sort of sucks. But you have to have the string representation of it. You can't do anything else. So, wish there was a better way to do that, but there isn't. So yes, we're using enums in that way.
Samuel, who wrote Tenancy for Laravel, also has this package for enum augmentations, I guess you want to call them. And one of the features of this package, one of the traits that it includes, is the ability to make enums invocable. So you can do, file system disk : Wilbur and then call it as a static function, and it will return the string value. So that way you get, the IDE support, you get the completion, and you also get, the ability to get the value of that enum member without having to then chain on arrow value. So that
feels pretty good.
But yeah, it is kind of annoying that PHP does not
cast it to a string for you automatically. Yeah,
casting it to a string in a in an array context like that.
Yeah, it's annoying, but whatever. So we've just swallowed hard and just been like, okay, we're just gonna do it that way. Arrow value it is, and so whatever, we deal with it. But speaking of enums, tell me about your enum thoughts here. Like you said, you were your enum adventures. So you said something about maybe like making a little video course or something, or what are you talking about?
Just like a little mini thing. I don't know exactly what it looks like, but the kids had a sleepover at the grandparents' place on the weekend, so I had a little bit of time, which I spent, of course, most of that time getting my setup working for recording video. But I just put together like a little 2-3 minute off the cuff video talking about enums, and we all have them now in PHP since version 8.1, and we love to use them and we love talking about them. And I think there's some interesting opportunities to explore like usage of them beyond just like, here is a thing that has like, it's either a backed enum that returns a string value, or it's just a basic enumeration that just has case names. But there's a lot of different ways of using it. Like PHP doesn't provide a nice way to return a list of options, or like it gives you cases, but it doesn't allow you to target the values or the keys and things like that. So there's ways around that.
You got to kind of build them all in with your own traits and all that nonsense.
So there's just to kind of talk a little bit through that and what that looks like. some options. This enum package that I mentioned is a good way to kind of bring that in a way that you can use it across projects and across enums really easily without having to manage your own traits and things like that. But then also talking about more interesting use cases like providing stateful functionality to use like your invoice status example from your Laracon talk last year. If you have a status of draft and active and paid and debt, for example, like you can attach descriptions to those and use them to label things in the UI of your application based on the current state of that enum. So, talking a little bit about that, talking a little bit about factory instantiation of enums and things like that. So there's some like it's not like a huge service area, which I thought it would be a good idea to do it because it's like fairly limited in scope and you can kind of go, this is everything in quotes that you can do and it's just done. But I think there's interesting exploration that, you see bits and pieces every now and then, but not a great deal of discussion around that kind of stuff. So I thought, just as a little bit of fun. Of course, since that 3-minute video, I've had absolutely zero time to work on it.
Right.
Because when the kids are home, there's no time, and I can't when the kids are asleep because one of them sleeps, opposite that wall as we've discussed before. So I can't be in here recording videos at night. So
yeah, that's I get it, dude. I'm there with you. Like I have to. It feels like we're in an eternal house project mode. You know what I mean? Like it's just never ends. So I'm putting up casing and baseboards right now, but yeah, I can't do it after the kids are in bed because I don't want to wake the kids up. So it's like, you only have so much time. So today all the kids were at a soccer game. So I came home from work and just got to going on it because it was like, I'm not going to bother anybody if I'm making lots of noise. And so tore it up, but that's how it is. Yeah. No, I think I'm curious how many people in the PHP ecosystem are not using enums. I guess a prerequisite is you have to be on PHP 8.
8.1, yeah.
8.1. And so, depending on what percentage of people are on 8.1 or above, that's going to be, that. But then of the people who are on 8.1 and above, who's not using enums? I don't know. It's like one of those features. It's one of the, I think you said it the other day. You're like, man, it's one of my favorite features of PHP now. We use it everywhere, and any place they say a magic string, I'm like, nope. Don't do that. Please don't do that. Please use the enum.
We have this enum called yes, no.
Ooh, I like that.
It has two members, yes and no. But because for historical reasons, a lot of our database actually stores yes and no in fields as opposed to a
instead
Boolean
of 1 or
0
zeros,
or 1.
yeah.
So in order for us to like operate in a sane way in our code with Booleans and then convert them, we've got like this factory method on the yes, no enum called yes, no from Boolean value. And that way we can handle situations like you pass in like some Boolean and then like if it's true, we return yes. And if it's false, we return no. Like just that,
genius.
Those small little things, but you're co-locating all of that
exactly.
behavior in one place, which means you can test
Correct.
that. Like you can throw different things at it. You can decide whether or not you want to handle null. Like is null an invalid state? Does null return null from this enum or does null default to false? All those kinds of different things that you co-locate and that behavior is there. So you can do it anywhere that you need to, anywhere we need to do that transformation from a Boolean to a string of yes or no, we can do it all in that enum. So,
and vice versa, right? Because if from the database you can cast to an enum, so you cast from the enum to the yes no type, or sorry, you cast from the database to the yes no enum, and then you have all that behavior again. So like when you're referencing that value, that column, you just you're dealing with the enum. So that's super handy, man. All that behavior you get, and then plus just the confidence to know that I'm dealing with one of these values. And
it's just when you're doing a match inside, like in the context of an enum, you never have to put a default state in there really, because you can only have an enum that exists in a valid representable state. So and this is like the PHP documentation talks about this in the notion of like the enum exists to prevent you from having a value that is in an unrepresentable state or something like that. Like if the enum is instantiated, then the enum contains a valid state. It can't be anything other than what is defined in the enum. You can't have an enum with a value of null. So
yeah, the only case in which you'd have to have a default state, and I've run into this a couple times, is so somebody will have a method called get options or get labels or get colors, right? And so what they do is they start listing all the enum cases on the left and then listing all the values that they should be associated to on the right-hand side, which is great, except for when you add a new case and you forget to add it into that method. And now you have a default state because you can have a valid enum value that does not have a state. And so instead what I've tried to do is do something like, and so this is a case for attributes, PHP attributes. And so what I will do is I will, instead of having, and this gets a little bit messy. It's not the right solution for everybody. But instead of having a get labels, and I'm sorry, I will still have a get labels, but what I will do is on the case itself, I will put an attribute of label on it, and I will define the label right above that case. So that if I'm adding a new case, all I have to do is follow the convention and add that new label on that new case. And now my get labels says, give me all the cases and loop over all of them and give me the associated label. And if there's ever one that doesn't have a label, it throws an error. And so I do the same thing for colors. I do the same thing for whatever. So it's like all of that stuff is right there located on the case itself. Now, like I said, does get a little bit messy sometimes if you have too many things you're trying to do, but it actually works pretty dang well, I gotta say. So that's another thing you could add to your enum talk, is using attributes to co-locate that stuff right up next to the case rather than in a match function.
Yeah, I like it.
I could send you an example of that too. Because it is a little bit tricky with the reflection. You know what I mean? You have to use that. You have to use the attribute and then the reflection stuff to get the option or to get the label.
Yes,
or whatever.
that is that is like I actually looked into like how to put your own attributes together, and because it is all meta programming, the only way to reference the attributes is to use the reflection API to do things to look for specific members of a class, and then you've got to look to see like is there an attribute attached and all this other stuff. I'm like, I guess it's nice if you do it in such a way that it's reusable and you can just put it anywhere, but it's also
that's what it is.
Yeah,
that's what it is. And so like if what I do is I have an attribute called, or a trait called has labels, and then has labels has that method on it, and then I already know the attribute is going to be label, and then it just I only have to write it once, and now I know I have a labels function on there that automatically uses reflection and the label attribute to get the labels. So it's not difficult to implement, and the trait says exactly what's on the does exactly what's printed on the tin, as you guys say. I'll send you that. And I'll send anybody else who's interested in it too. There actually was a Laravel news article that I used to sort of get me on this path. The Laravel news article was like adding your own attributes to your enums or something. It was a while back. Yeah.
Nice.
Yep. I'll have to go give credit to the author.
Definitely do that. Yeah, and we'll reference that as well. That's interesting. Very good.
Awesome. Okay, one other thing. What do we got here? We got the testing of batches.
Yeah. So you were doing this. Looked kind of grim, and I think the realization that we came to in that chat was that yes, it is grim, but there's not really a better way of doing it.
There is no better way of doing it currently. So let me explain the situation. So I've got a action that is dispatching a batch. So the action creates a claim, and then I have a batch that gets dispatched is that right? Yeah. I have a batch that has two jobs added to it, which is like add notes cover page and add claim cover page. Those are the two jobs. And then I dispatch it. And then I have a then, which tells the batch, when you are completed successfully, do this action, right? And then you have a catch, which says, if anything fails, you should do this, right? So that's the situation. Bus, jobs, here's the jobs, dispatch, then catch, right? Those are your sort of methods you have there. So, what I want to do is I want to assert in my test that there were two jobs dispatched, and that the two jobs that were dispatched were these two jobs. Now, some people would call that like spell check testing, and I would agree. It is spell check testing. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to prevent future developer, not me or me, from accidentally commenting one of those out or having something stupid happen. You know, some merge conflict comes in and they just delete it. And now my test is, you know, if I don't have this sort of spell check test in place, it's like, yep, everything's fine. So that's what I'm trying to avoid, right?
Yeah.
I'm not testing the actual job, the add claim cover page or add notes cover page. I'm not testing the job. I'm testing that job separately, but I want to know that the batch is getting those specific jobs. Okay, so the way that you can do it right now is in your test, you batch fake, and then you batch assert dispatched, and then within there, you get a pending batch. So that pending batch contains the jobs that are added to the batch. So you see pending job arrow jobs. That will give you that. And so then you can do assertions against that. Now it just gives you a collection of them, right? It just gives you a collection of jobs. And so in order to assert, you could say count that there's 2, and that works fine. Yeah, you can count there's 2. But then if you want to assert that the 2 jobs that you are expecting to be there are there, you kind of have to like map to the get class of the job. You know, you kind of map over each of them, you know, return the class name of the job, and then check to see if it contains the 2 jobs that you're expecting. That's sort of crappy. It doesn't feel good at all. It feels like there should be something like pending batch arrow has job, my job. Pending batch has, you know, has arrow has job, my job. And then it should, I would want to do something like pending batch, then, you know, whatever. Did my then work? You know, I shouldn't even actually have to do then. If I wanted to call then, I could just do it. So
yeah, I feel like number one, I like these kind of smoke tests for events, for jobs, for things like that, where you just want to fake that this happened, right? You don't care the side effects of those jobs running or those events firing or whatever else. You just want to make sure that given you hit some controller or something happens in your application, this expected behavior was fired, like that these jobs are dispatched. And then, as you say, testing the actual behavior of one or more of those individual jobs is the concern of instantiating that job, calling the handle method on it, and making sure that works. Like a test somewhere else that does that. So I feel like JMac has talked about this before, about like testing batch jobs or something like that. Maybe he's worked on it. Like I'm sure I've heard about it in passing somewhere, and I feel like it was JMac, but I could be wrong that it was him. Around, you know, a better way of doing this stuff.
Yeah. So I mean, what I ended up seeing and maybe throwing out as a suggestion, and if anybody feels inclined to do so, you should definitely do this. I think it's a great pull request, honestly, to the framework. We have this idea of assertable JSON inside of our JSON tests, which is awesome. It's really cool. So you can say assert JSON, and then you have a closure which has an assertable JSON. And so what that allows you to do is allows you to make all sorts of assertions against the JSON that's in there. You get this really nice class that has all these little helper methods to give you the ability to test all sorts of things in your JSON, the payload that's coming back. Super cool. So my suggestion would be here, when you say bus assert dispatched, instead of just getting the pending batch, what you would get is something like an assertable pending batch. And then it would that assertable pending batch would have little helpers on it that would allow you to do exactly what we talked about. Is this job in the list of jobs that's getting dispatched? You know, does my then closure, when it's executed, have the side effects I would expect? That sort of stuff. And so this was an example. That was a suggestion that somebody gave on Laravel, on Laracast's forums. Was they were like, well, when I do my assert batched, I take that pending batch and I new up a fake batch that I have passing in the pending batch, and then they just do exactly what I talked about. They've created all their own little helper methods to do exactly that. Test to see if the job is in there, etc. So it's actually not that difficult of a PR to make to the framework, but it would be a pretty cool PR to make. So if anyone wants to scoop me on that one, go for it, because I'm probably not going to do it. But I think it could be really cool. And David Hemphill said he talked to Taylor about it, and Taylor was like, "Yeah, there's no better way to do it right now." And so, not saying that there's not a better way it could be done, just that currently in the framework there is no better way to do it. So if you're looking for your first pull request to the framework, go for it.
Be a pretty good one.
It would be a good one.
Excellent. I don't think I've got anything else.
Okay, I think this was a pretty valuable episode. I think we talked about some really good stuff in here. Yes. Yes.
Thanks for the hot tips around the because that gives me some ideas around progression from like this is what we used to do pre PHP 8.1 and enums. This is how you might do it using like just an inline method, and then the attribute stuff is nice because it gives you the ability to kind of do that in a consistent way across all of your different enums without having to like implement the same match thing everywhere. It's just going to be available.
Correct.
So,
yeah. And it protects you against that stupid thing that I talked about, which is like somebody adds a case and forgets to add it to the method, which has happened to me before. That's the reason I know it's a danger is because it actually has happened. And so what you end up having to do is have this default method that just throws an exception in the case that it's something other. And that's annoying too. That doesn't feel good either. Yeah. And so like I said, I'll send you a code snippet of what I have, and the nice thing about it, that redeeming quality is if there is ever a case that does not have a label on it, it throws that exception saying, well, you have a case that doesn't have a label, so you can't have a get labels attribute or whatever. So
it's always funny testing like that kind of enum behavior because you find yourself, duplicating all of that stuff just to make sure that I have set. And then, okay, I ran the test and it failed because I forgot to do it. So you can go back and do it. But it's just like, now I've got to copy and paste the description from the enum into the test. And then, if one changes, the other one has to change. And that kind of, leads you down the path of flaky testing. So, yeah, I like this idea.
I will send it to you, my friend. And maybe I'll throw it in a gist and I will send it to the wider world as well for anybody who cares to do so. And I will find that Laravel news article as well and send that to you.
Yeah, I found that Laravel news article.
Sweet. Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, that's literally, I don't need to share mine then. I mean, that's exactly what I did. Yeah. What he has there is exactly what I did.
From
Rob Fonseca. Yep. So credit to Rob. Thanks, Rob. Good call.
Cool.
All right, dude.
The only other thing I have to say is we only have 47, I think, early bird tickets left to Laracon for this year. So I think we're about 8 weeks away. So we are doing well. We're having lots of stuff. We're getting into the final stages of my side of the things now. Making sure that the speakers are all set, starting to finalize all of our Hoive, all the Taylor setting us up the bomb over here with just the level of production for Laracon US this year. So we've got some ideas. We've got some things that we're going to do. But we're looking forward to it. We just started storyboarding our I say we. Nucleus started storyboarding and scripting the intro video for this year. So, we did it last year and obviously we have to follow up this year. But we've got some cool ideas for that as well that we'll pursue, and some other fun stuff. So I'm looking forward to it. It'll be here before we know it.
You having to put a lot of work into your intro talk or anything like that? Oh boy, I'm talking about it.
I may have made a terrible mistake. Last year.
And doing that last year? Yeah.
Well, because last year there had been a 4-year gap since the last time we did a Laracon.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense.
It was a good idea to kind of set the tone and set the scene for, why we do what we do.
Yeah.
I just don't know. How
do you do that every year? That's hard to do every year. Yeah.
I don't think you need to do it every year.
No, I don't think so either.
I've got some things written down. I've got a document, and I will do some kind of opening address, but I don't think I'm going to tell a story like I did last year.
Honestly, again, let's go back to the Aaron Francis, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Sorry, Aaron, we should be giving you royalties or something. But to intro Laravel or Laracon this year, he literally just, it was honestly like a tiny little stand-up routine. It took 2 minutes, right? It was funny. It was very chill. But the thing is too, is it's you don't want to put a ton of time into it either because, let me see, how do I preface that? You want it to be good, but also half the people in the room are just getting seated. When you actually kick it off. It's just you don't want to stake all this time on it and then be really frustrated if half the people weren't listening because they were just stopping their chat that they were having with somebody you haven't seen in a year. So anyway.
Yeah, I think this year it's going to be much more high level, just the general how many of you are here for your first time? How many are here for your fourth time?
Oh, totally.
It is.
Yeah.
Just like that kind of stuff. And just set the tone. Set the rules and things like that around expectations, and then just launch straight into it this year, I think.
And what we all realized this year at LaraCon US is people are really just there to see the people anyway. I mean, like the talks are great, you know what I mean? But like it was so heavy emphasized, like just there was like a whole back room that was just like, hey, people who want to hang out and just want to watch it on a screen, just go back there and chat. And a lot of people did. So it was cool. And so same feel, right? Don't put too much pressure on yourself. Like the thing that you're providing is the space for people to meet. That's what you're providing, and you're going to do that regardless. So you've already won, Yep. Sweet. Perfect. All right, dude. All right. Episode 166. 162. Find show notes for this episode at northmeetsouth.audio/162. Hit us up on the Twitters or the X at Michael Dorita, at Jacob Bennett, or at North South Audio. Rate us up in your podcatcher of choice. 5 stars would be amazing. And if you are looking for custom keyboard keys, you should check out dapkeys.com. I sent another picture today. Let me make sure it's Dap Keys. It is Dap Keys, I think. Anyway, this dude, Austin Cameron. What's that?
The campfire. That was sick.
Yeah. Austin Cameron is this dude's name. Met him at LaraCon. But he gave me a little Livewire keycap and a little campfire keycap. Holy crap. Both of them are so cool. They're like in acrylic. They're awesome. I can't wait until he opens up his site stuff because I'm going to be buying some of them. And I told him, I was like, yeah, I've got a low profile keyboard. And so he was like, oh yeah, maybe we can make a different mold for that one or blah, blah, blah. So I think he's going to try and do maybe like not a full size keycap, but not a low profile keycap either, because you can't really get too much stuff into the acrylic if you do a super low profile. So he's like going to do like a medium height one. I'm like, super awesome. So nice. I couldn't be more excited. I'm so geeked out about these keycaps. They look so awesome on my keyboard. I'll have to share. Yeah, they look so fun. So anyway, shout out to Austin. Thanks, dude. All right, everybody. Until next time, 2 weeks. We'll see you then. Peace. Bye.